Oh my gosh. Andrew.
See you.
How are you? Put your voice on. How are you?
Is it on? It should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh my gosh. It's been too long.
I know.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Ah.
Oh, hey.
Rachel.
We're in bed and Raul's not quite dressed, but
Hi, Raul.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, Mary. Mary. Hi. Hi, Heather.
I'm not really there.
Oh my gosh, how exciting.
Rory Meredith says hi. We just
Oh,
got a text phone.
that's cool. Hi, Meredith. I need to send her an email. I have a tabletop press for her.
Ooh, she'll be so excited.
Yeah.
I'm not really in Marfa. I'm going to change my background.
I was gonna be jealous for a second.
Nope. I'm quarantined at home.
Yeah.
Actually, I've gotten to my studio a little bit.
Hi, Michelle.
Who are these other people? Hello, people.
Michelle, do you see Andrew Fresh in the room?
Hi.
Oh my gosh, it's Andrew. Hey,
Oh.
Andrew, it's
Whoa.
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
That's awesome. Oh my,
Yeah.
what an unexpected surprise.
Yeah.
I love seeing you.
And Michelle, do you remember meeting Jess? Jess is here too.
Oh,
Where?
so good.
Wait, I don't see everybody.
Yeah, I have
On
to
gallery.
figure something out because my computer changed.
Oh, look at that. Look, there's so many more people. Hi, all you other people.
So many people. Thank you, Amber. Okay, everybody, and Juliet, everybody can open their chat windows and introduce themselves in the chat. That would be great. And also, if you want, we're in this sort of weird third space and we're coming from all different types of places. So if you want to make a land acknowledgement in the chats as well, I'm gonna put in a little website. If you don't know who was on the land you're living on before you and is still there, you may want to check on nativeland.ca. I am in Portland, Oregon. So I'm going to type it in here, right where I live. This is the traditional lands of the Clackamas and Cowlitz people. And in the Portland metro area, there are over 380 different tribes represented by folks living here now.
No, it's I know. It's a video, but I am not on video. I'm watching my class. Yes, there's no
Okay. I think we'll just wait a couple more minutes to let some folks filter in. We actually, hi, Kara. And hi, Diane.
Hi.
Had, and Diana also, Lucia. Oh my gosh.
Do you want me to make some breakfast for me?
do I want to make breakfast?
Who's having breakfast? Yeah.
Rory?
Yes.
I don't actually know how to type in.
Okay, so down at the bottom,
Yeah.
if you mouse over your screen, there's a little window that says chat, or a little
I
chat.
click chat.
Click on chat, and then you can put your cursor in the window down below on the right.
Over here?
Yeah, over there. Michelle from Southern California. Yay.
Type message to everyone. I see. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, just in case we're like, I've been on Zoom for like 7 weeks straight. So I take for granted that maybe not everybody else has. So quick Zoom tutorial. If you keep your microphones on mute, if you have background noise, that's helpful. Hi, Liz from Toronto. Thank you. If you keep your microphones on mute, if you have background noise, I feel like I don't love, I mean, there's things about Zoom that are so amazing, and I'm so happy to be connected and to be able to do things like this. But I'm also sort of hating this like presentation mode where one person talks and the rest of, especially in a workshop setting. So please just like, hopefully it won't be too chaotic. We'll give it a shot. Please just jump in with questions. You don't have to like raise your hand or try to get my attention because I can't see you all at once. So just unmute yourself and ask a question if you have one as we're going. I'd like to have this be casual, or try to make it be casual. I'm in my kitchen, so let's make it be casual. So yeah. Okay, it's 10:06. So maybe we should get started. Thank you everyone for your land acknowledgements. That's fantastic and beautiful. Okay. So has anybody made ink before? Like do this if you've made ink before. Andrew, you probably have, right?
I've made paint.
Paint, cool, yeah, awesome. Okay, so
Sure.
one of the things about ink making during quarantine is that it's something so easy to do in your home, and you don't necessarily, oh, avocado, nice. Don't necessarily need to have any special. You don't need to have any special equipment, or all you need is food scraps. And we all have food right now, hopefully. So I wish you could smell it in here right now. I've already started a couple different inks on the stove. I have a rosemary going and a parsley going that I just went out back and picked. And then there's a bunch of things just around my neighborhood I could go find. Pretty much everything that has color has pigment, right? So pigment is the particles that reflect color. So we can extract pigment from just about anything. I have a friend who's extracting pigment from like turkey. So you can experiment and go crazy with this. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen and showing you a short little slideshow. We'll kind of go in and out of it as we work. So, oops, one sec. Let's go find it first. There we go. Okay. So, thanks for being here or being there in this virtual space here in my kitchen. So let's talk about foraging. I've mentioned in the description that you'll be surprised what you can find in your own backyard or on a walk around the block. When you go foraging, just make sure you bring the things that you need, clippers or scissors. It's helpful to have little baggies or little things to sort your clippings in, and a Sharpie to label what they are. Some gloves are always helpful because some of the things you might have reactions to. And then it's also helpful to have some sort of a plant reference book or app, or a tree reference book or app. And to also remember that color might come from any part of a plant. So it might be from the fruits or the flowers or the buds or the bark or the inner bark or the roots, leaves, sap, stems, nuts, hulls, disease, lichen, moss, etc. And one plant can produce several different colors. So it's fun to experiment with all the different parts of the plants. I also wanted to share this piece of text by Robin Wall Kimmerer. It's not something that she came up with. This is a Native American sort of way of being that honors life, taking life for life. So she asks, we ask to permission of the ones whose lives we seek and abide by the answer. We never take the first and we never take the last. We harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Take only what you need and leave some for others. Use everything that you take. Take only that which is given to you. Share it as Earth has shared with you. Be grateful. Reciprocate the gift. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the Earth will last forever. So I wanted to also talk about this notion of collective learning. So one of the most exciting things about making inks and dyes for me is that it always feels like an experiment, and I'm always discovering new things, and it's pretty magical in a lot of ways and surprising. So hopefully as we move through the next hour and a half or so, we can learn together. And I'm, as an educator, I'm interested, and as an artist, I'm interested in exploring collaborative ways of thinking, being, organizing, and making. And we should expand our capacity to cooperate in holistic, pleasurable, and emergent ways. So we'll have opportunities to discuss some ideas about color and the processes of ink making. So urban foraging, like a walk around the block. Here in Portland, I went on a walk and I saw all these things: St. John's wort, rosemary, Oregon grape, cascara, buckthorn berries. There's about 110 different types of buckthorn, so I'm pretty sure wherever you are, you'll find buckthorn. Black walnut, alder, red alder cones, Oregon white oak, acorn caps make a really beautiful ink, and pokeberry makes a really intense bright pink ink. So here's St. John's wort. We all know rosemary. It grows everywhere in Portland, in everyone's gardens. Oregon grape, there are two different kinds. There's a tall Oregon grape and I guess a short. I don't know what, what the vernacular for the cascara buckthorn, which is actually a poisonous plant, so don't eat it. Black walnut, it's the hulls that make the most interesting ink, not the nut shell or the meat inside, or the nut meat. The green hull on the outside is what makes really beautiful ink. I'll show you that in a minute. Here's the red alder cones. Oregon white oak acorn caps. Oregon blackberry. There's a couple different types of blackberry growing out here in Oregon, and the Himalayan blackberry is a more aggressive type of blackberry. There's also a native blackberry, which is this one. And then the pokeberry, which is an ornamental plant that is not native to Portland, but you see it a lot because it is an opportunistic plant. So let's talk about words like invasive for a second. We've sort of developed this militaristic language around plant life, which feels unfair to me. So we use terms like alien plant invaders or non-native or invasive species. And I think these are things that we need to consider why we're using this language in reference to a living being. We'd never say that about other people. Hopefully we wouldn't. So maybe we should think about shifting our language and using terms like pioneer species or opportunists. They were brought here by many different ways and are trying to grow and exist just like all of us. And they often will thrive in places where there's damage that humans have done. So it's also mostly our fault, right? So some other thoughts on language surrounding plants and living beings, thinking about verb-based languages versus noun-based, and thinking about switching up the way that we talk about these resources. With colonization, we often use noun-based language because we think about ownership and capitalism, right? We claim things as ours, we extract resources. So if we start to shift our language, we'll start creating, strengthening our relationships with nature. Mm-hmm. So saying things like pigment givers versus dye plants, or thinking about color as a substance that something has versus, or excuse me, what color does versus what it has. So shifting it to a softer verb-based language. And also like thinking about how we speak about plants. Instead of saying it, we might say who or they, which might remind us that they are living beings. So, a note, actually, I'm gonna stop the slideshow for a sec and start showing you a few things on the stove. And then we'll talk about what's the difference between an ink and a dye. Inks have, we're gonna talk about additives. So we add certain things to inks to make them work better on paper, or as opposed to being soaked into cloth. So it's basically like the type of viscosity and the binders that we use to create the ink, but they're very similar. So when I talk about what references and books to look at, any dye maker's book is going to be a great ink maker's companion as well. So, so yeah, any questions, other questions so far, just speak up or type. Flora Incognita app. Also, a couple other apps that I like for plant ID. It's important to pay attention so that your ink doesn't boil down too far. Picture this. Yes, that's one that I was going to put in. And then iNaturalist. Naturalist is another good plant. An enamel pot is not a must. So we're going to talk about two different ways of approaching ink making, from a sort of a scientific, more controlled viewpoint, and then from a more philosophical, magical viewpoint. They're both, I respect both approaches equally. I come from a craft background, so I tend to want to control my materials in some ways, or like really understand them on a molecular level. But then there's this other side of me that really wants to just surrender and see what happens. So like cooking your ink in iron is going to create a much different color than an enamel pot. If you want to control color and have less contaminant, you should work with enameled pots. So, okay, so I got some inks. Sorry, I'm going to be moving the computer around, and if that makes you nauseous or dizzy, just close your eyes when I walk around. So I've got some rosemary and parsley going, and I had them on a little too warm. Basically what we want to do, I'm going to move you over here actually. What we want to do is, can you see that all right? Is bring the ink up to a simmer before letting it, you don't want it to boil, and then you keep it just under a boil or on a simmer and let it cook for like 2 hours. So I'm going to show you how to put everything together. Okay, so here's a nice little enameled pot that I'm going to put on the heat, and then I'm going to add 2 cups of water. I like to often think of recipes in parts versus cups and tablespoons, or liters or whatever, because then you can scale up or scale down however you want to. So 2 parts water to 1 part plant matter. So I made myself a delicious little avocado and cucumber salad last night. So I chopped up the avocado pits and the skins. So I'm going to put those in, And that looks like more than a cup, so I'm going to add a little bit more water. And then bring that up to a boil. I will make a PDF of the slideshow, which has recipes and things in it, and share it with everyone. I'll get email addresses from PNCA so that I can email that out later today. So now I just bring that up to a simmer and let it simmer anywhere between 45 minutes and 2 hours, or even longer. The longer that you cook it, the more intense your color will get, and also the thicker your ink will be. So one way of thickening an ink is to just cook it down and reduce it, and to continue to let it simmer for a long time. So so we're not going to see this avocado in its completely finished state, because we don't have 2 hours to wait for that. But we will see parsley and rosemary. Also, some other. Well, let's go back to the slideshow. Okay, when you're thinking about heart, does anybody have questions so far? Are we all good? Hi, Nico. When we think about working with living materials and controlling color, we have to think about a lot of different options or things that can affect the color. Hang on, I gotta open my chats. Coach Neil, yes. We'll talk about bugs in a little bit. So wait, there's questions that I've missed. Sorry, can't see the ink. Dried and fresh. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Enamel pot. Fuchsia red, yes. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Cooking living materials. So we have to think about terroir, which is, if you drink wine, you might know that different soil types might create completely different flavors in food. So like with wine, this term is used a lot. So of course that's going to change what types of colors you get as well, to think about where something is growing, whether it's growing in a mineral earth or a clay earth or very composty earth. Think about seasons. Something that you harvest in the spring might be a completely different color if you harvest it in the fall. How much precipitation the plants are seeing, the time of day that you're harvesting can affect color as well. If you harvest in the morning when things are fresh and cool, you'll get a completely different color than if it's in the middle of a sunny day and plants are starting to lose moisture and wilt a little bit. Soil composition has a lot to do with terroir. Whether the herbs or plants are dried or fresh will change the way the color comes through. Thinking about life cycles, whether you harvest a bud or a flower, you might get different color. Thinking about aging and fermentation as well. Like walnut hulls make the most intense, beautiful color after they've been sitting on the, I wait until they've been sitting on the ground rotting for a long time before I harvest them, because that fermentation process intensifies the color a lot. And that's true of a lot of other plants as well. And I also think about lunar influences, like biodynamics. The idea about biodynamics is that we harvest during a full moon when tides are high, because the moon influences the amount of moisture or nutrients in the plant. So lunar influence can also affect color. Rich foraging. So right now, while we're in quarantine, we can think about things like onion skin, avocado peels and pits, which I just put in the pot, rosemary, beets and beet greens, turmeric, berries, tea and coffee, black beans. I don't know about freezing. That was one thing I was going to write on that but I haven't ever experimented with freezing something. I assume it's going to change the composition of the material. I would assume it is going to make a difference, and I'm not sure what that difference is. I froze garlic once, and it turned into this crazy jelly-like substance. So freezing does affect things. Pomegranate also is a great. And these are just really short lists of plants. Like there are so many things that you can dye with. You can dye with anything that has color, or make ink with anything that has color. So the tools that you need, just the basics, non-reactive pan or a reactive pan, that's fine. Funnel is really helpful. Coffee filters or a fine mesh strainer is really helpful. Jars and lids, spoons or stir sticks of some sort, paper, and then I put distilled water down because that's one way of really controlling your color. Even when I say controlling color, like you can't control it. It's a living thing. You can create more consistent results if you are working with more controlled environments, okay? Some people say that rainwater is the best type of water for making ink or dyeing because of the pH. Let's see. All right. So, types of binders. So I mentioned that one thing that sort of shifts dye into ink is adding a binder. So there's all kinds of different inks and also paints that you can make with botanical color. Sorry, I'm distracted by the chats here, one sec. Okay, so brief listing of some of the more popular binders and all of these types of paints I have made with botanical colors. So watercolor is typically what I make. Most of my inks are liquid watercolor, meaning that I've added gum arabic and honey to them. And I keep them in a liquid form so that I can paint with them. You can also make watercolor cakes by switching the amounts of gum arabic and honey that you add. You can make gesso. I'm going to show you examples of swatches of these things in a second here too. So gesso is more of an opaque ink. It has more of a pastel-y looking, it's kind of like frosting, how I think about gesso. It's got this really chalky, you're adding whiting chalk to it. It's got a really chalky sort of light absorbent quality to it. Tempera paint, by adding egg protein. The fresher the eggs, the better. That's a very ancient paint, style of paint that was used in a lot of illumination. Encaustic, by adding wax. Casein is the milk paint, using milk proteins. And then you can also use acrylic as a binder. Acrylic, you know, base, like that you buy at the store. So these are plastic polymers. Other binders, experiment, shellac, varnish. Hang on. Shellac, varnish, agar, which is a seaweed, type of seaweed. That's really great for if you're wanting to like screen print or work with fabric, painting on fabric. It makes it more of a gel. Wheat paste, potato starch, gelatin, methyl cellulose. There's all kinds of different binders that you can use. And I do encourage you to play around and experiment with things. So I'm going to focus on watercolor because that's typically what I make. So the binder in watercolor paint is water soluble. It's a plant-based material called gum arabic. It increases the viscosity of the plant or of the ink excuse me, and helps it flow onto the paper in more of a controlled fashion. And it also binds the ink with the paper. So actually when you're adding gum arabic, the pigment particles are sticking to that gum or like attaching themselves to that gum. So the botanical pigment doesn't just float to the bottom of your jar. And then that helps it bind to the paper as well. And it also helps preserve the color. So it works as a mordant as well. We'll talk about dry pigment also and making dry botanical pigments. And dry and wet pigments are both suitable for watercolor. And then gouache is made with basically watercolor and then adding the whiting chalk, which makes it more opaque. So I'm gonna stop my share again, show you some samples, some swatches. So for instance, here is staghorn lichen, which you typically would extract pigment with something like ammonia. And I don't love using ammonia. I want to try it with urine sometimes, see what happens. Lauren, have you ever tried any pigment extraction with urine?
I haven't. I've seen it. Well, I've heard of people who have done it with indigo, but I haven't heard it for inks or dyes at all.
All right.
Yeah.
Lauren's our resident expert here. So anyhow, so staghorn lichen ink that was just boiled, no ammonia. When you extract it with ammonia, it can make an intense, beautiful, like fluorescent pink ink. Then here's staghorn lichen gouache. So it changes the sort of like pasteliness or so like here's black walnut, and I mixed iron with that to make it a darker, more intense black walnut, and then here it is as a gouache. So it can really shift color by adding the whiting. Also, I mentioned that there's so many different variables for making inks. I pulled out all my logwood swatches. So here's some logwood that I probably didn't cook very long. Here's another logwood that was probably cooked a little longer. Here's a logwood that was cooked really long. So you can get lots of different results. Logwood I've seen from like reddish browns all the way to this really intense, beautiful purple. So here's that this batch of logwood with a second cook on it came out like that. So I used the same matter twice. Here it is mixed with a little bit of turmeric. Here's a logwood gouache. Look at that, it's so beautiful. From that more purpley one that I showed. And then here's logwood gouache from a lighter one as well. Let's see, questions. Does it change with time once you use it? Of course, yeah, time is absolutely one of those things that can affect ink and the color that you have. Keeping it in a light sensitive bottle, I always use like brown glass or blue glass, helps to maintain color, but if it sees any UV light, it's going to fade. And then also thinking about fermentation and things like that. We're going to add preservatives, natural preservatives to our ink, but you can, it can mold. It's a botanic material, so it's going to continue to live and move on. So, other questions? How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good. All right. Let's see. Let's go back to the slideshow for a couple more minutes. So here's the basic recipe. Prepare your botanicals. You want to chop them or crush them or mash them up. The more surface area you have, the smaller you chop things or the more you mash them, the more pigment you'll be able to extract. If you're throwing big chunks of something in a pot, while I'm doing this, I'm going to start an onion skin one too. And there's a question. One sec. Oops. Somebody have a question? My mouse is not letting me go to chats.
Hey, Rory, it's me. I was asking about alcohol inks, adding alcohol, both as a how that works as a substrate, but also to help preserve the ink.
Yeah, so turmeric powder that you can just buy in the grocery store. I did a turmeric alcohol extraction, so that's pulling out a lot more of the pigment. So just using like isopropyl alcohol that you can get at the drugstore, is gonna, really this only needs to sit for 24 hours. And so we'll strain this and see how this looks. You can boil fresh turmeric, but it doesn't work as well to boil the dried ground turmeric. It works better to do an alcohol extraction. So, oh wait, now I can get to chats. Okay. Yes, it's good to keep it in the fridge. I don't typically do that. I feel like trying to use your ink, I mean, we're making it so we can use it, right? So try to use it before it goes bad. I think having this sort of like time-based element to the ink creates some urgency to wanna make things and paint things. So prepare your botanicals, chop, crush, or mash. You can add vinegar or salt to intensify the color. So I've got these beautiful onion skins. I used quarantine as an excuse to make French onion soup. So I have all these onion skins left over that I'm gonna make an ink out of. I'm running out of pots. Let's do it in this one. So I'm gonna put some onion skins and add water and get that going. And I'll also add vinegar and salt to this one. Onion skins are such a satisfying ink. It's such a, you can get so many different colors from them. So think about red onion versus yellow onion versus white onion. Also thinking about additives as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, I'm just doing a small batch of onion skin. I also use, I have some enamel spoons that I like to use that are non-reactive. Just know that if you're using a wooden spoon, it could dye the wooden spoon. Okay, I'm gonna grab a vinegar. And just put a little splash of vinegar in there. So vinegar and salt are working to change the pH levels of the ink, which is what shifts the color. So another thing that's really helpful is to have little strips of paper next to your workstation so that as your ink cooks down, you can test it. So let's test our rosemary. Let's see, this has been cooking for about 45 minutes, the rosemary, and the parsley a little bit longer. So I'm gonna try to see if can you see the rosemary? It's really, it smells amazing.
It's on screen sharing, so we can't see the.
There on the right, you can also see, if you click gallery view, you can also see people on the right of your screen. So here, I'll stop screen share. Okay, here's the rosemary. And then I've got the avocado going. And then I've got the onion skins going as well. And then I took the parsley off the heat. So here's the rosemary, which looks really yellow on screen, I think, but it's like a kind of like a chartreusey green, which is really pretty. The parsley is the one that I cooked down too far and I added more water, so it's not doing much yet. But I have so much parsley in my garden, I'll just do a new batch because I took my eye off of it. And then we'll try the avocado. It's only been going for, I don't know what, 15 minutes or something, but we'll see what's happening. Not much happening with the avocado yet, so it'll take a little bit longer. Avocado skins and pits make this really beautiful mauve color. Yes, citrus peel. I have oranges here. With paper, sorry, I'm going backwards through the questions. With paper, I like to try all different types of paper. So for instance, let me grab this. So I made an Oregon grape ink this summer. So it's got this sort of grayish color going on, but it's got some little highlights like around the edges of purple. I don't know if you can see that or not, but right around the edge, it's purple. Depending on how you put the ink on the paper, it can do different things as well. But when I painted on a different paper, gosh, this is hard because like computers don't really show color very well, but it's a completely different color on a different paper, and this is the exact same ink. So I've also seen it like on an amate paper, which is a little bit higher acid content because it's made with lignin fibers, which is like a tree bark. So the ink came out like this bright blue because the acid, like adding acid to our pot shifts the color. So think about acid in paper. That's also going to shift the way the color comes out. So I'd experiment with lots of different kinds of paper, actually. And the types of paper that you like to work on if you do. Hey, Apple, that's mine. So yeah, experiment with different types. And then let's see, rosemary stems and all. Let me go back to the top of the questions. Alcohol inks. Resources or books, yes, I have a whole list at the end and I have a whole pile of them here to show you as well. So we'll get there. Botanical ink from others mold. Meaning what, Mary? Botanical ink from other people? Or was there a different question that I didn't see? Chop up my onion skins. No, I kind of crumple them up a little bit and put them in. Down. What do you call it? BioHue. Cool. Do you all know that in the chats, on the bottom right corner, there's a little button with 3 dots. So at the end of this session, if you click on that, you can save the chat. So any resources that others have put in here, you can save, and then you'll have a text document of all these resources so you can remember them if you're not writing them down. Okay. Flower petals, yes, flower petals make beautiful inks. Just depends, some of them are more intense and beautiful and others are less so. Light fastness of botanical inks, they can fade, but we're gonna have a little conversation about impermanence and time. Okay, cool. Did I get all the questions? Citrus peel. Okay, gotcha. All good? Okay, so I mentioned you'd all get this basic recipe. So after you've cooked your ink down, we're gonna do this part now where I also use, I wanted to mention I also use crock pots for making ink. When I do walnut ink, I'll do a huge batch in a crock pot. So it cooks it really slowly and maintains an even temperature, and you can leave it and walk away from it, and it works really, really well. So we're going to strain our ink by using a funnel. See this? Okay. And a coffee filter. So coffee filters are a great inexpensive thing. Yeah, you probably have at home. You can also use some sort of like muslin or really tightly woven cloth or several layers of cheesecloth. And this is just going to filter out the plant matter. So because I'm not paying attention, the rosemary cooked way down, so we're not going to get very much of it, but I'm going to filter it out right now anyhow. Ooh. So you can see the plant matter is in there, and then it's filtering down into a liquid into the jar. And also, sorry, it's kind of dark. Because of quarantine, I do not have gum arabic on hand, but I'll talk about it for a second. I'll just brighter spot. Can you see this better now? So there's the rosemary ink that I got from that batch. So gum arabic you can buy in solid form. Sorry, chat. Use the stems too, or just, okay, so for the rosemary, I just use the needles or the leaves. What are they with rosemary? Are they needles? Does anybody know? Or are they, I mean, needles are leaves, I guess. So I didn't use any stems. The stems, when I've used stems before, they make the ink a little more brown, which is beautiful. But okay, so we strained the ink. Now we can add our gum arabic. So gum arabic can come in hard, like solid form that you then hydrate yourself. And it's a lot cheaper that way if you buy it. And I have a recipe for how to do that as well that I'll share with you. And then the intensity of or the thickness of the gum arabic that you mix will change a watercolor from a liquid to a cake. Yes, needles. I like needles better too. Internet says leaves, but needles are the leaves of a pine tree. So they're both, right? It's all of it. So then I would add about 10 drops of gum arabic per 2 ounces of ink. So a lot of times I'll funnel it into my 2-ounce bottle and then use the dropper itself to put the gum arabic into the bottle. I just bought these on Amazon. I don't want to use Amazon anymore. I know you can get these at get these same bottles at like health food stores or whatever. SKS bottles. Thank you, Jenny. There are so many resources out there, right? So these are not that expensive and they're really great because of their light fastness. So are there any printers with us today? I'm gonna stop my share so I can see you. Yes. Hey, Mary. Letterpress printed labels are the best. I printed these out at Camp Colton and then dipped the label itself. This is handmade. Jen made this paper. Where are you, Jen Woodward? Amazing paper maker who runs a studio called Pulp-and-Decal. And she does a residency with C3 Initiative, which is amazing. So I dipped the bottom of the labels into the color of ink it was to just show the color of ink. So this is the Oregon grape on this handmade paper, which is much more purple. And then I just printed on there when it was harvested as well. Clary Sage, yay, paper making. Riddy has a fundraiser going on. Wait, Clary Sage has a fundraiser going on. They move their wares to online sales. Cool. Okay, thanks, Michelle. Okay, so I don't have gum arabic, so I'm not going to add it to this ink. But I have this tiny little funnel that I use to get it into the bottles. And then we can also add honey to it. So honey is this amazing magical substance that we all know about and love. But honey also helps to attach the pigment particles to it and helps viscosity. It also works as a preservative. So I add honey to my ink as well and stir that in. So let's go back to the slideshow again, get through this. So you can also stick an actual whole clove, so preservatives, you can actually stick a whole clove in the bottle or two as a preservative. Cloves have this, again, magical, also scientific substance that works as a natural preservative. You can also use clove oil. You can use, well, we'll get there. It's in here. So additives. To shift color, you can do this while you're cooking or after you're cooking. You can add things like alum, which you can get in the grocery store. I don't suggest buying alum in chunks. I would buy it ground if you can find it ground. You can get that alum at art stores too. Like I got this big bag of alum. Can everybody see me when do you know how to like see me with the gallery view? Okay, so I bought this bag of alum at a grocery store or at a art supply store. So you can also get it in the grocery store for a lot cheaper. Copper, adding a piece of copper into your ink bottle and let it sit with the copper or cooking it with the copper. You can also do that with iron oxides, like iron oxide is rust, right? So rusty nails, you can add into your ink cooking pot or afterwards. Cream of tartar is another thing you can find in the grocery store. So, and then ways of modifying color with pH would be to add vinegar or wine, lemon juice, baking soda, salt, borax, lye. More questions? Yes, botanical colors. I have that as in my resource guide. Thank you, Kyla. Oh, I want to look at you all again. We'll do that in a second. Okay, preservatives. Thyme, clove, or wintergreen oil are used to help prevent mold from forming on the ink. Like I said, you can put a whole clove or two right in the bottle. The thyme oil is really intense. The smell of it is really intense, and I feel like I prefer clove oil smell. Wintergreen oil also works, but I don't love working with wintergreen oil because it's actually pretty toxic. So you have to be really careful with it on your skin and things like that. So thyme and clove are much safer to work with. Refrigeration will extend the life of your ink. Storage in dark bottles, which I talked about. And then there's a way to extract botanical pigment, and that results in a dry pigment, which I'll show you in a minute. And then that extends life indefinitely. So let's have a conversation with this idea of collective knowledge and sort of building knowledge together. Let's talk about impermanence. Like why would we, would you only use one kind of additive for, yes, one kind at a time, yeah.